Hello, family. Welcome to JFK Today, your direct link to all things politics, comedy, and culture. I am your host, Janaya Future Khan, champ yapper and frequent nuisance in the activist and comedy worlds. Let's get dialed in. So, we're here in What the Fuck Just Happened, Part 2. I was really hoping to move on from this, but it turns out that we're going to be here for a while, but at least we're in good company. Just some quick hits before we jump into it. I gotta say, I saw the white women bead thing, okay? The call to action. So basically online, one or several white women decided that maybe they should identify each other by wearing blue beads on their wrists so that we would know and they would know that they were the good ones. And my thing is, this is why y'all need black friends. I can tell when you don't have black friends. It's immediately apparent. I have some openings because this is a stressful situation because I'm like, here we are, there's fascists at the door and your response is beads. Beads. And I want to say, if I'm looking at this in the best light, this is an attempt for people to say, okay, like, we care so much. The worst interpretation of this is that it's rampant opportunism. Like someone's like, buy my beads. I have the blessed beads. But the thing that makes me laugh the most, and I haven't seen this particular take yet, right? Is like, just demographically, you guys already know who you are. Like white women only really ever hang out with other white women. And if you hung out with other people, you would know not to do that. And more importantly, if you actually talk to the people who voted red, we wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. So these are just a couple of thoughts that come to mind when I think about this moment. But again, I'm going to choose to have the best interpretation. But I'm like, beads, my nigga, like beads. I think there's a little bit more to it than that. Anyway, I did want to jump in on the conversation that I've seen online very quickly before we hop into the meat and potatoes of it all. The calls for Sonia Sotomayor to step down. So this is a Supreme Court justice, one of the three that is on our side. I don't know how else to say it. There's like really weird right-wing demagogic fascist kind of Supreme Court justices who don't give a damn about the rule of law, which is the thing that they're supposed to care about in the Constitution or whatever. And, I think there's a lot of fear because of what happened with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her legacy. Let's go back to the time of Obama. Obama wanted to bring up Merrick Garland and put him in the Supreme Court and asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, amongst others, to step down. She refused to step down. This is a woman who I think was beloved and has a pretty solid legacy, but she refused to step down. And as a result, gave Trump, when he came into office, she died, I would say unexpectedly, but I think the only person who was surprised was Ruth herself. Because, I'm all for, being a little 90 or 80-year-old and you're going to the gym and all this stuff, but she passed away. She passed away because that's what happens when you get to those kinds of ages. And it really opened us up to the situation that we are in now. So I think out of fear, people are saying, now it's time for Sonia to step down. She is 70 years old and she has pre-existing health conditions. I don't know if I think that. So, and the calls to action, to be clear, are for Biden, right? And this has got to. Is anybody else experiencing whiplash? I forgot about him. I forgot about Joe Biden for a while. It was just, there was so much Kamala and there was so much future. We left him behind like an old broom, right? Like we were like, goodbye, Joe. Hello, Kamala. And now we're like, hey, Joe, what's up? Could you do a couple of things for us, you think, before you go? I think time is our biggest issue with this. He's got a very short period of time. And I understand the fear and I understand the urgency. I don't know if he can actually do it. And this is not me saying that he shouldn't, or I just don't know that there's time for this because there has to be some kind of alignment in the Senate, and the Democrats simply do not have whatever you want to call it, the balls, the eggs, whatever's your thing. He doesn't have it. I'm so stressed out with this Biden situation because I'm like, he's like an old fly trap. You know what I mean? Like, now we got to go back to him, and he's got to slapdash some kind of protection plan. And it's like, it's like when Ned Stark said winter is coming, and then your response was like a scarf. Like, it's like clinging to a tent pole in the middle of a tornado. Like, we're back to Biden for a very, very brief window of time. So I just want to remind us, though, because this is very key, right? What Trump has been able to do in the courts system in his first tenure and what's to come, right? This is very important information for us to consider because this is where we're headed. And there's a lot of waxing poetic online. I'm sure you've also had to listen to every kind of take imaginable, every pundit. Nobody is right and nobody's necessarily wrong. There are so many factors that played into how we got here, why the Democratic Party, along with us, lost so astronomically. And the biggest answer, and it's the answer to me, is always going to be the Democratic establishment. And the other thing, of course, is that we got organized, plain and simple. But the Democratic establishment is a big reason for that. You will hear me talk about racism all the time, but that is the backdrop of America. And we have to maneuver knowing that racism and misogyny dictate so much of what actually happens here. So I'm not going to belabor that fact. That's why there's this rampant attack on education to begin with, but something that's often overlooked, and it was certainly not brought up when people were justifying, not voting as part of a strategy. And again, we don't need to get into this. I completely understand where people were and why. But in this moment, right, I'm not saying that this is what a lot of folks wanted, but this is what I sort of warned against, which is, what's the plan, right? What was your plan? We're going to end up turning to many of the same Black organizers, right, who were saying we need a stronger strategy for this. But I want to be clear again that how we got here has nothing to do with that population of people at all, not even in the slightest. They were just, in my opinion, a bit too ahead of the curve. You got to be in the now. And so all these, like, the fall of empire, it's not going to happen. And I got to be honest with you, when we talk about these things, I don't think we're thinking of the human beings in the meantime that are Black people and brown people, and particularly women who get caught up in this. Let me talk about this court system for a second, right? So remember, in his first term, Donald Trump chose 3 Supreme Court justices, right? These 3 Supreme Court justices gave them majority rule on the right. They were critical in overturning abortion rights. And if something were to go down now, right, where Trump just tries to keep filling the court system, particularly the Supreme Court, he will have potentially a majority Supreme Court with Trump loyalists, right? No president since FDR has done this, right? Has handpicked members of the Supreme Court with such efficiency. And RE with FDR, it took him 4 terms. These are lifetime appointments. Now, there's so many things that need to be contested in that, but that's where we are. And the other thing is, we tend to think, okay, the Supreme Court, that's all that matters. But no, right? Don't forget, in that first term, 234 federal judges, right? Trump worked with the Senate Republicans to help reshape the entire judiciary, right? 234 federal judges. I want you to think about that. Who's in court? Who goes to court the most often? And for what kinds of reasons, right? Black people, brown folks, poor people, trans people, migrants, immigrants, right? These are people going to court. So these are the judges that they face, the judges that determine what sentencing they get, what kinds of sentences. And when we think federal, these are the places where if some kid somewhere gets discriminated because of their hair, because of their gender, they get to go and the families unify and everything happens. A lot of money is raised. these are how our rights were won, right? An issue was made clear, and infrastructure and legislation and these were set up around it. And these folks are now going to be betrayed again and again and again by these court systems. And I think sometimes when we're waxing poetic online and theorizing, we lose sight of the actual human lives and human beings we're meant to be servicing and meant to be helping in this. So anyway, right now, Republicans will hold at least 52 Senate seats, right? They flipped Democratic-held seats in West Virginia, Montana, and Ohio, right? We know this. And here's the fact. Whether this number grows or not, right? Because I know right now we're still waiting for the rest of the House, votes and counts, ballots to trickle in. It's not going to change anything. Whether the number grows or not, Republicans have the power to confirm judges and justices with simple majorities. They're going to work to flood the courts again. They already have 234. The count is going to go higher. They played a better game than we did. They gamed the system. The system that we have a very, very, there's a word. I can't, it's more than fractured, right? Like, we have such an antagonistic relationship to system, and I get it. I get it. This is a system that exploits us at different times, abuses us at different times, positions certain people to win and certain people to lose. I know that, but we're in this impossible position, right, where there's a lot of possibility. We're in this impossible position where the very same democratic institutions, right, that have not serviced so many of us are now one of the only things that can insulate us on some level, right? Put some kinds of checks and balances on billionaires who are tilting the scales. Put some checks and balances on these rampant mega dog cultists who want to destroy, who basically just want to create a fascist theocracy, a Christendom, like back in the days. Alito, who's 74 years old, is likely to retire under Trump, right? So Trump will seek to pick somebody that is fairly young and healthy, and that is another person, right? That won't necessarily increase the number, but it is another person that we are going to have to fight for the rest of our lives. Strategy. So under Trump, he will likely pick many, many justices that will wreak havoc on the lives of policed Black and brown communities and poor people and indigenous and trans people, migrants, right? We know it. Here's some key breakdowns, because I have been looking at very closely. Why was the information so wrong? Right? Polls are flawed. Polls are flawed. This I know. I did so much research. I listened to the experts. You know Ezra be knowing what he's talking about. Ezra's got his finger on the pulse. Lefties, righties. The closest thing we came to knowing some kind of truth was when, remember that billionaire episode, right? Where we talked about how Bezos and the dude who owns the LA Times, both billionaires, how they intervened, and it made me think that they know something that we didn't know because they came out of the shadows. That's the closest thing to understand what went down. But that is to explain the emotion and I think the confusion. Objectively, intellectually, it's very clear that the Democratic establishment are not the leadership that we need. They're not the leadership we deserve. And they're not the people who are going to protect us. So it's what we do now, knowing what we know. So here's some insight that I gleaned from several people, including Ezra Klein, some myself, thinkers from the Washington Post. It goes on, right? So with Ezra in particular, he did this for the New York Times. He said, when I talked to some of Biden's top political advisors after the midterms, they told me that the president's approval rating was no longer an electoral indicator worth obsessing over. In a nation this sharply polarized, any president would be unpopular. That's what they were running on. So when we talk about the fact that they were literally running against dislike for Trump, and Trump as the harbinger of doom rather than trying to service and be there for what the leftist, progressive, liberal base wanted and called for, we are correct. We're correct. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. This was like so damning to me. Democrats, right? In that logic, Democrats didn't need to change voters' minds about Biden. They just needed to keep reminding them of the chaos and consequences of Trump. And you know that Kamala Harris adopted this strategy. She's culpable 100%, but she was set up to fail because they're always going to be set up to fail. With this logic, right? They believed that they just needed to run anti-Trump. While Trump was like, how do I shake up and rattle this tree to get more votes from different populations of people? So let's be really clear. The Democrats were invested in winning already politically engaged voters, right? And the data, and it was by a huge margin. They were doing well in the midterms. This matters, right? This is the one thing I'll say that's like context. They were doing well in the midterms, and typically presidents will see that they're actually bombing in the midterms because, and this is something that's going to happen with Trump too, right? Not his loyalists, but for everybody else. The conditions. You hate the president that's in office, right? When your life is still the same and you're still struggling and you still can't pay for gas and inflation is still happening and all these things, you hate the president that's in office. So, but because there was an anti-MAGA coalition across the establishment Dems and their very specific donors, they thought that they just could hold that, quote, winning strategy on already engaged voters while the Republicans were winning voters with less day-to-day interest in politics. That's why they chose the weird route. This is important context because if you think about the previous midterms, right? So think about Barack Obama, in 2010, 2 years in, he was like, oh shit, we're getting slammed in these midterms. Nobody likes us. We got to refocus and re-engage the voters that we lost. Go back even further for Clinton, Bill, not the other one, right? Not that I like him either, did the same thing. He wasn't doing great in 94. He was like, okay, great. Let's just re-engage the people who no longer like us. But Biden and Harris believed very much in the anti-Trump data versus the need to re-engage their electorate. And they weren't. And here's the facts. Our base was not sufficiently motivated by Dobbs and democracy. And that makes sense. That makes sense. It's been a disastrous year electorally for Democrats. And you got to wonder, what is it that they're saying right now? Right? Like, what is Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, what are they saying right now? So from NY Times, right, they did this interview. It's the first interview since the election, right? Nancy Pelosi does exclusive with them. And these are quotes that I pulled from the interview. This is what the person who was interviewing her wrote. Pelosi seemed unwilling or unable to concede that her party had been handed a crushing electoral rebuke and rejected the criticism of the party's direction. Let's be really clear. So while we're out here busting our hump trying to figure out what happened and why it happened and what we got to do about it, she is obstinate and refuses to even engage. She's just stonewalling and in absolute denial. And I want to be clear. Obstinacy is death to the organizers. That's the growth. It's terrible. You can't lose this badly and say nothing. So Bernie Sanders, right, who I think has been a little bit of, he's probably sleepy all the time. I was going to say he was a sleepy lion, but he's up there. They got him out of his chair. He's rankled. He's upset. He got up and he said, the Democrats, the establishment Dems, the Democratic Party, right, does not look out for the working class. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that the working class doesn't show up for them. Apparently, Nancy Pelosi took umbrage to this. Here is a little bit of an inception, an interview of an interview. You're going to hear somebody questioning Bernie Sanders on his thoughts on Nancy Pelosi's, her response to him saying that the Democratic Party lost the working class and therefore the working class went to where they needed to go. Here we go.
Well, as you know, your statement was met with some sharp reaction as well. This is what Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi had to say. Take a look. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Bernie Sanders has not won. Let me, with all due respect, and I have a great deal of respect for him, for what he stands for, but I don't respect him saying that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class families.
Senator, how do you respond to Nancy Pelosi?
Well, Nancy's a friend of mine, and we've worked together on many issues. But here is the reality. I have to say to Nancy, in the Senate in the last 2 years, we have not even brought forth legislation to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, despite the fact that some 20 million people in this country are working for less than $15 an hour. In America today, we have not brought, in the Senate, we have not brought to the floor the PRO Act to make it easier for workers to join unions. We're not talking about defined benefit pension plans so that our elderly can retire with security. We're not talking about lifting the cap on Social Security so that we can extend the solvency of Social Security and raise benefits. Bottom line, if you're an average working person out there, do you really think that the Democratic Party is going to the mats, taking on powerful special interests and fighting for you? I think the overwhelming answer is no. And that is what has got to change.
I just want to get that last little bit in there. I was about to hit it. This is the thing. They're not going to the mat for us, and they haven't for a long time. They go to the mat for their stakeholders and their donors, and that is what the establishment Dems do. Remember that AOC, right? AOC got in by fighting against a sitting incumbent. Then they basically banned the practice. They've made it so that our folks can't even get in anymore. And how did AOC beat a sitting incumbent who had won that region for however many years? Door knocking, connecting with people. And you know what? That just brings me to another thing. We got to get our shit together on the left, actually. Okay? It's time. Like, we've got to get our shit together. We are not loyal. We're not loyal. And I think it's time that we figure that out. I remember when AOC ended up going to the Met Gala. Let the girl have a good night. She wore a dress that was something about antagonizing the rich. She can't wear a dress on a night. Everything we do, everything we say is constantly interrogated, constantly challenged. It's like we've forgotten who our actual enemies are. And here's the thing. When you say, okay, I'm not talking to these people anymore. I'm not engaging with these people. I'm not engaging with straight people. I'm not engaging with Trump voters. I'm not engaging with men. I'm only going to talk to the people who agree with me. Where do you exercise your activism? Everybody else, because something to sharpen your sword against. And that's what we do. I get social capital. I get points if I can cut you down. We turn on our own communities. And I got to tell you, I think we've forgotten who our enemies are, because we're not in the age of enemies. I want to talk about something really quickly called the paradox of tolerance, right? The paradox of tolerance. This is a philosophical concept suggesting that if a society extends tolerance to those who are intolerant, it risks enabling the eventual dominance of intolerance. So it's like, okay, well, there's intolerance, so I need to be kind and I need to be good, because if I do that, then maybe I can fight intolerance. But if I don't do that, right, if I participate in the intolerance, then I am an enabler of it. No. It's very clear, right, that and the argument is in this book by Karl Popper, The Open Society and Its Enemies. He argues that a truly tolerant society must not tolerate those who promote intolerance. And we see that. If intolerant ideologies are allowed to move unchecked, right? They're just allowed to be expressed without any pushback. They exploit open society values, right, to erode or destroy tolerance itself through authoritarian or oppressive practices. So this is in The Open Society and Its Enemies in 1945. Sounds like a good year to understand that. A good year to break that down. A good year of reflections. And it's curious to me. It's very curious to me how we're here. And when I made this post, went viral. A lot of people loved it. A lot of people, felt some kind of way about it that election night. And I know a lot of you have seen it, where I say it's time for us, we got to make it hell for fascists and bigots and liars and misogynists over the next 4 years. and really more, to be honest with you, right? And it's time for us to like be in our big over the top kind of gay Disney villain era. And I actually fully believe this, and it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And I realized it was because, and they said it, this is not me guessing explicitly, that there was some expectation, right, that we caretake fascists, that in naming something what it is, we are being divisive, and that I am being divisive, or that I am calling for violence. And I find that very curious, right? Like, these are some of these folks are the same folks who are intolerant of any, kind of branching off thoughts on what we should do as a strategy. But you suddenly have a whole wave of grace for Trumpism. I'm not interested in them. I want to be really clear. I'm not interested in them at all. But because I saw something and they did it well, and I intend to do that for us. Trump fought for his base, right? He fought for his base and he won. He said, these are my folks. It's rich folks. It's this kind of things. It's this kind of that. And he won. And I want to be really clear about something. I want to be really clear. I am in a villain arc because when fascists are the good guys, we're the villains. And this idea that we don't know what kind of person they are, I don't care. I don't know, right? I don't know if any or all of the Trump admin guys are genuinely hateful. But I know that hate isn't a deal breaker for them. I know that racists are commissioned and authorized by them. I know that women dying from abortion bans isn't worth even a pause to them, right? I know that anti-trans legislation and anti-immigrant policy are unconscionably served up as a solution to society's ills, devastating entire communities in the process. That is enough for me to say, fuck them. I don't know if billionaires or this Trump supporting group, I don't know if they're genuinely evil people, but I know that these billionaires use their extraordinary wealth to exploit people struggling over the cost of eggs and rent and gas, right? I know that billionaires co-signed a platform of bigotry just so they could get unregulated federal contracts to increase their wealth in a time of unimaginable human suffering. And that's the thing that we don't get with these billionaires. The bigger the whale, the bigger the mouth. It gets to a point where the only way to grow out their wealth, which is all they care about, and that is the thing that gets them off. That's what happens when you have that much power. It's only about increasing the wealth. It's the race to the top. Elon Musk has gotten rich. He started out, yeah, sure, right? This tech idea, that tech idea, and the original source was from, emerald mines and shit in South Africa, thanks to his little racist pappies and all that. But this is how they get rich now. It's federal government contracts. And the way to ensure that you have as much money as possible is to keep it unregulated. And you do that by putting a finger on the election. So I don't know if those guys are good guys or not, but it's enough for me to say, fuck them. Trump ran on a campaign of change. He called us his enemies. He won his people over. And he did what he said he was going to do. He immediately started cutting taxes for the rich. He fights for his people. I'm going to fight for mine. Because you deserve to be protected. You deserve leadership that is unafraid to speak the truth. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve every fucking good thing, right? So I know that there are many mixed emotions out there and a lot of people who are working through a lot of things. So I thought, let me be clear about where I stand. I am ready and I am tireless. I am built for this. I will not allow us to lose to some grotesque golf playing, cargo pant wearing losers. I simply will not stand for that. And you know what? This Democratic establishment has got to go. We don't need to belabor the fact that they failed us. We just need to figure out. I say this, I said it already, we're fractured, but we're not broken. We are, and I am, and all of us collectively are going to figure this out, and we're going to have a good ass time doing it, because I'm telling you, we don't need to play the whole civility thing. That's what the Establishment Dems told us to do. And we tried it. This is my last thing I'm going to say before we hit that question of the day. I am so You want to know what culturally, because I thought about it, right? I'm like, what is going on culturally? Like, why? Because there's the political answers. We have them already. We have the political answers already. We have the race answers already. We have the misogyny answers already. We have the this. We have the that. What is the cultural, right? And we know that the manosphere mobilized. I realized something. They stand on business. They say what they want, and they no longer care. And many of them never did, whether or not they're liked or not, or whether or not they're off-putting. They state very clearly who their enemies are, what they believe, or that they don't care about certain things. We don't do that anymore. We used to do it all the time. We used to. But there's something that creeped up in these last several years where there's just this culture of, like, it's time for Joan Rivers energy. It's time for they not like us energy. See how you can make exceptional fucking art by taking a position, by feeling something strongly and fighting for it. That is the energy that we are being called into again. It's who we used to be. And it's who we've got to be to beat them. I will not let us lose like this ever again. It's partly why this show is, I wish more power for us, because I got to tell you, I saw this coming fucking years ago. It's why I got into comedy, and it's why I got the show down. But you know what? If I'm being fully transparent, I got in my own head too. I thought, I don't know. I don't know. Will anybody even listen to this? Will this and that happen? I'm plagued by, this was one of the worst years of my life, And I thought maybe these things are telling me to not do this. And I had my two closest friends, right? Because a nigga ain't got no money. I'm out here. This is a self-funded. And I thought, maybe I just got to get a job and just whatever. And I had two of my closest friends who said, I think the fuck not. No. And it was what I needed. And so my job is to pay that energy forward to you. Whatever you got to make, whatever it is, I'm telling you, we're about to ball on their ass like you wouldn't believe. That's the kind of energy we're here for. That's the kind of villainy we're about. Wheat pasting, guerrilla fucking art, pop-ups, and fucking spikes to the sky. Let's go. Why don't we hit that question of the day?
What's your favorite anime series and why? What's your favorite anime?
I played that twice because I love that question so much. I got to tell you, I've been waiting my whole life for this. What is my favorite anime series? I can't answer that. There's too many, but I can tell you what anime genre I'm feeling right now. Shonen. I love shonen because they always, right? Shonen is a anime geared towards young boys. It's pretty much what I am inside, I suppose. And it's all about facing adversity and never, ever, ever giving up. Like, you will be on your face. So, some demon is just beating the shit out of you. And you dig deep and you find it and you remember all the people and all the hands that helped you get there. I owe a great debt, right? I come from nothing, but I owe a great debt to this world, to all of you, to every hand that helped me. And I am looking forward. I'm very much looking forward to spending the rest of my life paying that debt back. We are in it to win it. And I promise you, once you let go of these shackles of civility, the shit that, we black people let go of that shit a while. We call that respectability politics. I'm saying now white people are in a chokehold by civility. Fuck it. No more. I'm not saying an end to kindness. No. I love kindness. I'm saying an end to niceties. Only kindness. Let go of the bullshit. It's time for us to stand on business. Okay. With that, it seems like it's about time to cue up that outro music. I love y'all. Just want to say thank you so much for listening to JFK Today. It means the world to me. This show really is a labor of love. New episodes drop 4 times a week. We're available everywhere podcasts are. I want to hear from you. Don't forget to drop your voice note questions to jfktodayshow@gmail.com. Shout out to Carolyn and KR. That is the JFK team. Ha! And shout out to you, the listeners, that make it all possible. Love you.